Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor in the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Also, make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. That's our Discord server, $2.99 per month. You can cancel at any time. Link is right here in the description. The place for most heat, information, conversation, consternation, celebration, 24 hours a day. You can communicate with other Heat fans. We pop in there with updates. We've got stage shows. We have a draft channel. We've got a transaction channel. Check it out. Again, it's Off the Floor. Also, check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Includes Prize Picks. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E. Put down $5. You get $50 to play right away. It is legal in the state of Florida, again, and you can play up to 6 players and play the flex plays. So everything is available now on Prize Picks. Again, our official fantasy partner. Download it from Apple App Store, Google Play, and use the code F-I-V-E. Get $50 to play right away. And now, today's episode.
Mercy, luxurious, Heat Nation, yeah, Mercy and Lago, down to Biscayne, yay, 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs, where here's the thing, you can check the score, hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs, down to Biscayne. Kept the flow playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, Inspire have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick on 5 Reasons Sports. I got Eternal Bast. You can follow him at Eternal Bast. Also can follow him on Off the Floor, our Discord server. And check us out on playback.tv/5RSN. Be back for game 2 Wednesday night. That one also in Cleveland. 7:30 start. The Heat are down 1-0 in their series after they played it relatively close against the Cavs for most of the game. They kept getting it down to single digits. Ultimately, were blown out by 22 when it ended. Of course, the story of the game, Ty Jerome had a huge game against Miami, 28 points. One of the candidates for most improved player and 6th man of the year, who actually the Cavs are going to have some difficulty re-signing this offseason. He's an unrestricted free agent. But basically, Mitchell, Garland, and Jerome all torched Miami, and they did it using one strategy, which Brady kind of hinted at before the series, which was Max Strus setting screens to get Tyler Herro involved in the defensive action, and then the Cavaliers guards exploiting Herro. That wasn't all it was, but it was a lot of it. I actually put this out there, Eternal, today, and we're going to talk about this in the context of Herro's extension, not to base it on one game, but I think there's a larger topic that this brings up here. In this game, the Cavs had an offensive rating, this is according to Coach Lou, works for Miami Heat Beat. The Cavs had an offensive rating of 177.8. when Tyler was the primary defender. That's 64 points on 36 possessions. They had an offensive rating of 111.8 when Tyler wasn't the primary defender. So essentially, they were an average offense when he wasn't the player guarding, and they were the greatest offense of all time when he was. In the ones where he wasn't, 57 points on 51 possessions. And we're talking about this in the context of Tyler Herro, being an all-star for the first time this year, being the Heat's leading scorer, having a great end to the season, playing extraordinarily well in the play-in games, and helping them get to this point. But he also was asked by Anthony Chang recently, the Miami Herald, about his upcoming extension possibility. And we'll go through that.
You want to go ahead and read the quote?
Yeah, I'll read it. Well, we don't have to read the quote yet, but let me read what he's availed. They can offer him this offseason. So they could add a 3-year extension worth $149.7 million on top of the 2 years he has left in the contract. If they don't agree by October 20th, Herro would be eligible for 4 years at $206.9. So there could be some benefit to Tyler waiting. We've had this situation before, not the Jimmy situation, but the Bam situation. Bam was eligible for an extension at the time that the Heat were trying to hold their cap space for Giannis, Bam decided to take the extension early. By taking the extension early, it essentially took them out of any Giannis sweepstakes that never actually materialized. But if it had, they wouldn't have had the possibility to do what they would have been able to do earlier. Of course, they've since extended Bam again. Herro, they extended a few years ago. He's eligible for another one. He still has 2 years left on that contract. And of course, the Jimmy situation, they did extend him without any issue the first time. They were making him wait this time. He didn't want to wait, and now he's in Golden State. So there you are with that. So this is the essential stuff. And Tyler's exact quote, I don't know if you have it in front of you, but essentially was, to paraphrase, he was curious to see what they come with and to see how much they value him. So let's talk about it in this context. Let's talk in generalities, Eternal. How far could a Heat team go if Bam and Tyler are making $100 million a year? Which, again, would not happen next year because Tyler's extension would not kick in yet, even if it was offered and accepted. It would not kick in next year. He'd still be playing, I guess, on about $30 million. How far could a team, and again, this is the acknowledgement of the TV deal going up. There's going to be more money overall under the aprons, under the cap, and all of that eventually. Mm-hmm. How far could a team with those two guys making $100 million go?
I think it really just depends on like the team that you put around them. And I think, for the many times that we have had this conversation once a certain third person was there as the lead person, we always talked about the fit. We always talked about the machinations of the things around them. And so I think when it comes to that, like some of that is still there. A lot of that is still there, especially when you look at last night. Now, of course, this is fresh after the Jimmy trade, and you still have the offseason. Yeah, you still have the rest of the series. So there's still some more data that you can get from this, along with this season and going into the offseason and next year, if they do give them the extension. But I do think when building a team around specifically Bam and Tyler as your two pillar pieces, you better be really fucking good at doing that, it seems.
Well, you would have to be perfect, essentially. I mean, you would have to be perfect, and you would have to get help in the sense of other guys significantly outperforming their contracts. Like, you would need, just hypothetically, Khalil Ware to become an all-star in his rookie contract. I think. I mean, that's the only way you would get anywhere here because, I mean, even
Khalil and Nico.
Well, but Nico, that would have to be without him getting the extension. See,
I think they can give Nico the extension now because he hasn't really, played that great. They can give him an extension now that's, pretty favorable for them. And he just plays out of his mind. But I mean, then we're just talking a bunch of ifs.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's options in terms of players who could outplay their contracts. But again, now you're talking about, okay, are you re-signing Davion? Again, this is all hypothetical, but right. Are you re-signing Davion at what number? Because, if you're getting Davion for 3 years at 30 total, and you've got a $10 million part-time starting point guard, okay, that's a good fit financially for what you're overall doing. I would have serious doubts about whether or not you could build a contender with Tyler and Bam making $100 million. I just do. I mean, I think if you're going to pay those two guys, they have to be all-stars. Like you can't, and we can talk about Bam and that he should have been it could have been all-star this year if he got off to a better start. He's been an all-star in the past. Tyler was an all-star this year. But I'm talking about you need like two perennial all-stars if you're going to be making that kind of money, like what Boston has. I mean, you look at Cleveland's cap sheet. It's cleaner than Miami's because they've got a lot of guys kind of making in that 20 to 30 range. The Knicks even with all the money that they invested this offseason, because Brunson took less because of other things, they don't have those kind of numbers leading it. And I think this is the fear of Heat fans. And I want to put this out there because I want to make it clear. Both you and I have, expressed concerns about certain things related to Tyler in the past. I've been maybe more positive than you in general, but even I am saying flat out, I don't think it's feasible for them to just say, okay, you've had a good year. We're going to max you out right now. That's if Tyler even wants it now. There are some benefits to waiting for one more year. Of course, the negative is he could get hurt, which he has had a history of that, and then that hurts his earning power. So you try to take the money when you can, but also there's a possibility of making all NBA or one of the 3 all NBA teams, and that kicks in bigger money on the next extension if he waits a year. So there are some options here, but my overall thought is that I don't know that you can be perfect, which is what you would have to be if you're going to pay both of them that kind of money. And I do think and Bam was maxed out without a concern for the absolute most he can make. But there is a trend in the league now, which we can talk about, where some teams have pushed back on this idea of maxing out a guy just because you can. I mean, I think that the single biggest problem that teams get into in this league is they have a good player and they'll just max him because he's eligible for the max because they're afraid of losing the player. And when you start maxing good players, not great players, that's where you end up in trouble. But we saw New Orleans did it with Ingram. But now look at the end result of this. They didn't give him the max, right? They ended up trading him. Griffin ended up trading him, and then Griffin got fired. So this is why the idea of pushing back and not offering the max can be dangerous. But with Tyler, and I'll start the conversation here with you on this, that's what I would do. I would offer him an extension, but not the max extension. I would offer him, he's making 30 now. I would bump him to a raise of a little bit north of 35 a year. And then you see how he reacts to that. And if he doesn't react well to that, then we have to have other conversations about maybe his future. But I don't think you can just give him. I mean, that money is, $50 million is even in the current NBA is a lot of cash. And it plays into what we saw last night. If he's not a two-way player, how much can you pay that guy to lead your franchise? Go ahead.
No, I was telling you to keep going because I'm looking at the Brandon Ingram contract he just got.
Yeah, he did not get what he wanted. I'll give you the exact number, but he was an example of a team that just said, okay, you're a good player, but you're not an elite player. You're not our best player. Now, I know some could argue that he's the best player on the.
His new contract he signed a 3 years, 120. Yeah.
Okay, I think that the max offer was lower than that. I should have looked this up beforehand. He said, okay, it was a little higher than that. Here we go. New Orleans was eligible to offer Ingram. This came up last June. 4 years, 208. So essentially 52 a year, right? Oh, no, I'm sorry. 50, my bad. 52 a year. So they were offering him 52 a year, or that's what he wanted. That was the max extension. They ended up trading him, and Toronto gave him 3 for 120. So 40 a year, 1 fewer year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I kind of feel like that's where the Tyler thing may end up heading. And that's why I don't think that you just make a max offer from the very beginning. I think this can be negotiated down, or at least you get a little bit more wiggle room against the aprons and against the tax as you're going forward. Where would you start these conversations?
Let's talk after the playoffs. Will be my main thing. And looking at the season totality, I would say it's kind of hard. Predicting someone's health is hard. You really can't do that. I mean, Tyler just played the most games of his career this season after playing the lowest amount of games last season. And you're talking about adding, 3 more years, right? With that extension. And if it's not a strong playoff performance, I don't think he'll give up 64 a night against the Cavs. Which that's just insane. But if he does something similar, unless you are giving what I like to call just super dynamic offensive play or super dynamic defensive play, it has to be one of the two. You would like a balance of both, but if you are paying somebody max dollars, regardless of whatever the TV deal in the NBA, that max money is supposed to secure the foundation of your franchise. Mm-hmm. Like the way we look at Bam and the standards that we hold Bam to is because his long history of elite level defense, game-changing defense. So you wouldn't need game-changing offense from Tyler, like on a consistent basis, especially in the playoffs. Because if you're paying that money, you're not just paying that for regular season. Like we need you to produce like that in the playoffs. And if you get into the conversation of, well, he needs a point guard and then we start listing out needs, and it's like, well, you're not giving me two-way play. So what exactly?
Well, it's fun. It's funny the way that you talk about this because and I want to get into the Bam conversation because I think it relates to this. But it's funny because some of the things you're saying are some of the things that were discussed with Tua and his extension, which is, well, there's the health concern. There's also the idea that things have to be perfect around him, which is kind of the conversation that started about Tyler last night. Like my first reaction to last night's game was they need to protect Tyler defensively. Now, if we're talking about that, then that makes you question whether a guy is a max, because if you have to protect him defensively with others on the floor, you have to change the way that you play to a certain degree. Like he doesn't have to be elite defensively, but he has to guard his yard. Look, Jokic is not elite defensively, but he is so ultra elite offensively, and he's adequate defensively when he needs to be. And I think the other part of this that makes it more complicated is, do you max Bam? Yes, they did twice. Should they have? Yes. But Bam is not a true max either. He's not, because to me, like if you're talking about a max, like a guy it's a guy who, as your number one player, gets you into finals conversations. That's a max, okay? What's happened here in the past few years is these teams don't want to deal with the agents, okay? Well, they don't want to have a problem with the agent the next time around. They don't want to be perceived as cheap. Because trust me, there will be Heat fans who, if they don't offer Tyler the max, even if they're not Tyler fans, will start calling the Harrisons cheap. That's going to come out. You know that. Oh, well, they don't max Jimmy. Now they're not maxing this guy. Who's going to want to play here?
Oh, the timing is terrible. Timing is terrible.
No, by times, Tyler has that in his favor, too, because he has to know. His people around him have to know that the Heat are on the defensive about this stuff now because of what happened with Dwayne, because of what happened with Jimmy. And people have been overlooked that they've maxed Bam a couple times, and they maxed Jimmy the first time, and they maxed Tyler the first time, and they paid Duncan. People are going to overlook that.
They paid Kyle.
They paid Kyle more than they wanted to pay Kyle. They gave him the extra year to outbid other teams because Jimmy wanted them to. So, yes, all of that is going to get forgotten, even by those who are not Tyler fans, if they make an offer to Tyler initially that is perceived as disrespectful, okay? But with that being said, like I do think, just like I would think they were right to hold the line on Jimmy. You can talk about what he's doing in Golden State. He's doing it next to a generational player. The Heat were not in a position to get him a generational player. So with what he's going to produce over the next couple of years, do I think Jimmy would have been worth $120 million? No. Do I think it made this team worse to get rid of him? Yes. Do I think it was worth $120 million with this kind of directionless place that the franchise was? No. So I think that we can have nuanced conversations about this. I would be in full support of the Heat making Tyler an extension offer. And I want to get to more of this after the break. An extension offer that is commensurate with what he provides, which is really good offense. And at times, even though I do think he gives effort, unlike what I watched with Trae Young, okay, or LaMelo Ball or some of the others. He does give effort, but he's limited defensively. We know that. You've got to coach around it to a certain degree. He's gotten much better off the ball, but Cleveland hunted him for a reason, okay? They went into that game where like, this is how we're going to attack them. There was no surprise, nothing like that. And I think in that case, you can't just say, here's $50 million a year for 4 years or whatever it is, 3 years. This is the extension they give him right now. Here's $50 million a year. Here, you and Bam, here's $100 million. And here, we're going to be in the play-in for the next few years. I think they need to be more judicious than that. So I want you and I are going to negotiate this thing. You're going to be the Heat. I'm going to be Tyler after the break. Before we do, though, I want to mention a great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and it's our friends over at Water Cleanup. Yes, you can find them at WCUFL.com. That's Water Cleanup of Florida, based in Boca Raton, service the entire Tri-County area. And that starts with Michael Robert, their entire team. Start with the leak prevention. The preventative maintenance is what you need. If you don't get it, then they'll do the detection, they'll do the damage assessment, and all of that. Like I said, they service the entire Tri-County area. They got more than 200 5-star reviews on Google. So check them out. It's Water Cleanup of Florida. The best of what they do. Honest contractors, great people, big Miami Heat fans. They even got Udonis Haslem posters all over their warehouse. Check it out. That's how you know they're cultured. Check it out. Again, it's Water Cleanup of Florida, WCUFL.com. If you've got the schmutz, they got. All right, there you go. Okay, you're the Heat. Let me give you a scenario. The Heat lose this series in 5 games. Tyler picks up his scoring a little bit, averages 23, 24 points. Okay efficiency, not at the level that we saw over the last 2 months of the season because he's playing against a better team now. But they lose in 5. He has one game where he really pops, scores 31, leads them to a victory at home, a Game 3 win, but ultimately they fall in the series. Doesn't get enough help from some of the others. And, the Cavs advance. Tyler comes to you this offseason and says, hey, I'm Tyler. You asked me, you call me fragile. I played 76, 77 games. You told me to improve in certain areas, play off the ball more. I did. You told me to change my game to focus more on at the rim and at the 3-point line instead of the mid-range, except in big moments. I did, because he would revert to the mid-range in some of those situations. And again, I was our only all-star this team and really one of the few positive stories, in a frustrating season. And I'm a big favorite of a good portion of the fan base. Pay me. Pay me now. What do you say?
I would say, hey, we're proud of you. You did play 70, you played the most games of your career this year. As our organization speaks, as we preach, being the most conditioned, the most, all of that. Thank you for living up to that. Kudos on making the All-Star. Kudos for your play in that got us to the playoffs. We like being in the playoffs, and we have a certain standard. Thank you for getting there. As far as your playoff performance, didn't start off great, but you did get it somewhat to a level. We want to see more of that. How do you feel about pushing off your extension, giving yourself the opportunity to make more money next year?
Okay. We appreciate this. I'm not going to walk out on this meeting, but I think I deserve to get paid now. Bam was paid twice. I'm coming off an all-star appearance. You don't have a ton of extra scoring on this roster. I was the one constant offensively for you this season. And, I want to secure this. I've got a young family. I want to secure my family for the future. Don't want any worries about this. We don't want this hanging over our heads like the Jimmy situation did on this franchise. Let's just get this thing going and let's move forward together. What's your best offer?
How about $39 million with incentives?
Well, they can't incentivize it really. Not in a big way. So let's say you're saying, well, there's very little they could do regarding that wouldn't affect them on the tax line. So let's say you want to say a flat. So you want to incentivizing is tough unless we're going to do the NFL stuff's different. You want to say $39 million over 3 years? Is that your offer? You're offering $117. Okay. I think that's where this ultimately could end up. I think if I'm the Heat, I maybe offer even a little less than that and see what the reaction to it is. I might say 105 over 3, something along those lines, maybe 35 per. I don't think that would be accepted, honestly, particularly if Tyler thinks that he has more of it. But again, he's not going on the open market now. He's not going to be a free agent regardless. But then again, neither was Jimmy until the end of the season, and we saw how that played out. He's also not going to pull a Jimmy, I don't think in any way. That's not Tyler's personality, so you don't have that concern. I would say if you start somewhere in the 3 for 105 stage, and I think if it ends up getting negotiated up a little bit from that, I think you're comfortable. What is the level, Eternal, as we switch back to your real personality here? What is the level of contract that would make you uncomfortable here?
Anything above 39. If I'm being completely honest. I mean, what Brandon Ingram, literally his first year is 38. His top out is 41. Yeah. 41,904. So I think the Heat would be gracious to offer Tyler 39. Right? But I think realistically, they more than likely offer what you just said, which I don't think Tyler is going to take. We're talking about somebody who said, I deserve to be in the starting lineup after winning 6 men. Right after winning it, I deserve to be in the starting lineup. That's the conversation that we had all summer that year. And then going into the playoffs, who's competing for to be in it? It was Tyler, Max, Vic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tyler ended up getting it. We saw how that went, yada yada. He's been a starter since. Now he said last night to Anthony Chang,
Mm-hmm.
you want to read the specific quote?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I think you go ahead.
Oh no, I don't have it in front of me. You're setting me up.
Oh, gotcha.
So let's throw this out there, okay? Because I know generally what he said, which he was being gracious, but at the same time, he's being clear. I mean, he wants to get paid. He's curious to see how they evaluate him. That's totally his right to say
The
that.
curious part is what is interesting to me, right?
Well, yeah, I would be curious too.
You know,
Right.
so I do think that, you and I have talked all season about this, and we've talked about this recently. The Heat are going to make their decision. What they're saying is playoff tail, right? But at the same time, this isn't like a team that was constructed in the off season, right? It was constructed from a situation that went nuclear, and they made the best of it. So I think it's gonna be kind of hard to really do some real deep dive and analysis of what your team looks like in the now. And by now, I mean for like the next 3 to 4 seasons, based off of what you have right now.
But it's becoming a little clearer in the sense that you know which pick you're going to get. We're going to find that out in an hour or two, somewhere between 18 and 20.
Right.
You know that Duncan has a non-guaranteed this offseason, which to me makes him a likely trade candidate. You know that you're trying to move Rozier in the last year of his contract. He's not going to get his incentive, but he's still going to get paid around $23-24 million. And it's going to be hard to move, even as a last year of a contract going into a good free agent year. But they're going to make an attempt, clearly. You have Haywood in the last year of his deal, which is a cheap deal, which could be thrown in somewhere, which a team would definitely want his services. He would play. He's a plug-and-play guy pretty much anywhere if you decide to move him, because you got Keyshawn Johnson waiting in the wings if you believe in him, and he could take that spot if you needed to. You got Burks as a free agent, who I think they'd like to bring back in a minimum, but not much more than that. And then again, you have the Jovic situation with the extension, which they don't have to give him the full max, not max, but the full extension now that he's capable, that he's allowed to get. And they may decide to give him nothing at all, honestly, based on how things have gone. Although I would invest in him further, but I know some Heat fans would be split on that. But I think this comes down to this, and I think we've kind of hit on it. I think the Brandon Ingram contract is the marker. Mm-hmm. Because I think what you do is you say, okay, he ended up getting 3 for $120. He wanted more than that. He ended up getting $10 million less per year and getting one fewer year than he would have gotten. Brandon Ingram has been a one-time All-Star as a reserve. Tyler's been a one-time All-Star as a reserve. Neither of them has had significant playoff success, right? I mean, Tyler was part of a team that had playoff success, but he wasn't part of it. Ingram has not been part of that kind of team, has had some fit issues with Zion, just like we talked about Tyler having some fit issues with Jimmy. There's some similarities there. Brandon Ingram, when healthy, can be an elite offensive player from a different position. Tyler proved at times this year, with his efficiency certainly showed it, that he can be an elite offensive player. But again, he's not a top 5 in the league offensive player, and neither is Brandon Ingram. That would be the bar for me. I would offer 35. If it gets to 40, it gets to 40. But that at least leaves you $10 million in wiggle room per year that you didn't have previously. If I said to you, Eternal, and we'll close it here, that they end up agreeing with Tyler Herro on a 3-year, $120 million contract this offseason, like Toronto did with Brandon Ingram, you would say that's a win for the Heat? That's makes you edgy for the Heat, or how would that make you feel?
I would say that I am very interested in the type of magic they can pull off as far as building around Bam and Tyler. And I think that, to me, is my concern, if I'm being completely honest, when it does come to the team roster construction. It'd be different. Like, I wanted to touch on this during this pod, but we have more time another time. Is not about comparing Tyler to the super dynamic offensive players. He's not that. Not going to say he can never be that. He's just not that right now, right? But you look at Jaylen Brown. You look at all of the other number 2s and 3s. How does he match up against them? You know what I'm saying? As far as you already supposedly have your 2 and 3, Bam and Tyler. How could you get a 1? Right?
Right.
That's basically the question. And if it's like, well, you're limited because you don't have a war chest of, picks to trade,
Mm-hmm.
that means you have to trade one of them. So then it's a cycle. So it's just like,
right. Well, but Eternal, that's my point, and why I think you make the extension offer this summer, because I think if it turns out that you and Herro are at his representation are so far apart, like we talked about with the Jimmy situation, you want to try to get ahead of it. So my guess is they already have a feeling on kind of what he may accept, the fact that it's been addressed now in the media. But let me give you a contract that if I'm Tyler's people, I'll come back with. And I know this is close to you because you live in Memphis. This guy just had the worst plus minus in a playoff game in like history, minus 52 or whatever. Mm-hmm. Desmond Bain signed a 5-year, $207 million extension in 2023. That's every dollar that was available to him. He signed the deal, I believe, a little bit after Tyler did. So he wasn't. Tyler's max was more towards what Anthony Simons, R.J. Barrett, some of those others could be. Desmond Bain's making 40-something. I think if you're Tyler, you're saying Desmond Bain doesn't have to lead his team. I do in scoring. And I think then you're looking at the $40 million mark as a floor. But to me, the $40 million mark for the Heat should be a ceiling. I think that's where this comes in. I agree. Right. I think the Brandon Ingram contract is instructive for this, and there'll still be some Heat fans who hate the contract. Okay, if he's making $40 million a year, they hate it when he was making $30 million a year. And they're not going to take into account inflation and all that. But you have to pay good players. That's the thing. But you don't have to pay them the max you can. That's where these teams get into trouble, I think.
Let's end the pod here because I have a question for you. Right?
Okay.
Say Tyler continues to struggle on both ends in this playoff series. Right. Where does he and where does the Heat go from there?
Well, I think we have to put the struggle into context. I think it's fair to do that because they're playing against a team that won 64 games. That is loaded at his position. Maybe not with defenders, but they're loaded at his position with players that will challenge him on the other end. And I think that's what Brady got into. Is that it looks like the Cavs' strategy is to work Tyler over defensively so he doesn't have the energy to lead them on offense. Like that's pretty clear that's what's going on here. They don't have a whole lot of respect for Bam and Wiggins in terms of either of them giving you a 30, 35-point game. So they've decided it makes sense. I mean, we're going to do what's best for us on offense, which is we're going to target Tyler, and we're also going to do what's best for us on defense, which we're going to tire out Tyler. Like that's what's going on here. And I think that there has to be some context for that he does not have another guy who can just go get buckets. They don't really. Wiggins, we'll talk about him more in the offseason, but there's some inefficiency that goes with that. Yes, he can do it. He scored 42 for the Heat in a game, 30 in another game, but he doesn't really have the bucket getter here. So I think we have to account for that. Mitchell can have an off night, and Garland can have a big night. Ty Jerome can have a big night. Mobley can have a big night. Strus can have a big night. Like they have a lot of guys that they can go to. Miami does not have those level of players. Okay. And that's why there's a 27 win differential between the teams. It's not just because Jimmy threw a fit. It's also because there's a talent gap. So I think that has to be taken into consideration. But if Tyler struggles throughout this whole thing or simply has one game like he had in the Boston series last year where we had one really strong game and 4 forgettable games, then yeah, I think that the Heat can take that into consideration. I think they can say, look, here, and I think when they make their initial offer, I think that should play into it. But I think ultimately, though, they've got to be smart in the regard that this is a good player that they've developed, and I think they have to at least have a fair hearing with him about what value is and try to come to some kind of conclusion about that. And if they're too far apart, if they're $15 million a year far apart, and it's going to become an issue, then yes, this time get ahead of it and see what you can get for Tyler in the open market and try to reconfigure the roster. But my belief is, and again, I was wrong about the Jimmy thing because I thought that they'd all get in a room eventually and bang out a 3-year contract. It's kind of for the best that they didn't. But I think in this case, Tyler wants the extension this time. I think the Heat will come in and say, okay, we'll give it to you now, but we're not giving you 50 per. Okay. We'll give you 35. And I think eventually it comes around at that 40 mark. So, I mean, we'll talk about this more. I know it's polarizing. for fans, but I think it is something that has to be discussed because your question is right. Tyler's being judged right now. Now, he's not being judged on what feels like an even playing field with how the Cavaliers are being judged because they have more players around them, but if he's able to have 2 or 3 big games in this series and they lose the series anyway, then I do think it makes you more open to the possibility of paying him a little bit more because he's proven it on this stage.
Oh, if he does that, he's Teflon, right? If he does that, he's Teflon. But
I think to a certain degree, but again, you can't have a night like last night where he's given up that number of points on defense because then the offense doesn't even matter at this point.
Because it also would be different if Bam struggled.
Right.
Bam still had a good game. So if you have this discrepancy where Bam shows up and somebody like Davion Mitchell shows up and like these other people show up, even though they're not in some regards getting hunted on both ends. But that just goes back to to close out with your context situation. That just goes back to how do you build a team around them?
Right. And it's the same discussion we've had about how you build a team around Bam and Ware when you're playing a different style than you did before. And you don't want to have to build a team that has to have 4 strong defenders on the floor at all times at the expense of offense just because you have to protect one guy. And that's where this gets tricky. And that's where I say, again, I'll finish with this. You pay good players. You keep the players you develop, you should try to pay them and keep them, but you don't have to pay them every dollar. And I think that's where a lot of these NBA executives, if you see the ones who get fired, they're the ones who max out. When you max out as Zach LaVine, you're getting fired. That's what happened. No, it's just, I mean, you can't, when you max out a Trae Young, you're getting fired. Like these are guys who when I'm saying when you give them every dollar, it doesn't mean you can't give them 80% of what's available. But when you start paying them every dollar, because not all maxes are the same. Not all maxes are the same. Okay. That's the thing. And you're talking about a Luka max or a Bron max in his prime, or I'm not going to say Kawhi because he gets hurt too much, but even a KD max, like that's not the same as like when you're maxing out some of these guys who like you have hope can be, borderline all-stars. That's not, again, the Zach LaVine, even the DeMar DeRozans, like that you start maxing out good, very good players that don't lead to winning a lot of the time. That's where you get in trouble. But again, you have to have a front office that can be flexible in those situations and negotiate with the player. They have a good relationship with Tyler. I feel like this is not going to get to the Jimmy stage, but they've got to be, I think, respectful, but also judicious. Mm-hmm. Okay. And there's a line that they got to strike there. Anyway, Eternal, appreciate it. We'll do more coverage on this series itself, but we felt this applies because you're right. Tyler's being judged on this series, and judging in the NBA, you judge with dollars. That's how this works. All right. Thanks again to our sponsors, Water Cleanup of Florida, WCUFL.com, PrizePicks, use the code FIV.